In the remote village of Elderpine, there stood a house no one would buy, no matter how cheap it got. It had been abandoned for nearly 70 years, left to rot at the end of a crooked dirt road, its windows shattered and its walls covered in creeping ivy. Locals whispered about its history, about the child who vanished without a trace in the 1950s. They spoke of little Emily, a girl with bright eyes and a love for hide and seek. They said sometimes you could hear tiny footsteps or sobbing from under the floor, as if Emily was still searching for a way out. When Sarah and her 6-year-old son Ollie moved into the old farmhouse, they were looking for a new beginning. The house, with its creaky floors and weathered walls, seemed like the perfect place to start over. She thought it was a fresh start, a place where they could leave their past behind and build new memories. The move was supposed to be a healing process for both of them. Recently widowed, Sarah had spent all her savings on this house. She needed a quiet place to heal, a sanctuary where she and Ollie could find peace. The farmhouse, despite its age, seemed like a solid choice. At first, the house seemed fine, dusty and full of cobwebs, but solid. It had character, a history that Sarah found comforting. She believed they could make it their own. On their first night, Sarah and Ollie explored the house together, discovering its nooks and crannies. Ollie was fascinated by the old furniture and the creaky stairs, while Sarah felt a sense of nostalgia. Ollie was the first to hear the noises. He would often pause and listen intently, his small face scrunched up in concentration. It was as if he could sense something that Sarah couldn't. One night, Ollie came to Sarah, his eyes wide with fear. "Mommy, there's a kid under my floor," he whispered, clutching his blanket tightly. His voice trembled and Sarah could see the genuine fear in his eyes. He said it with such conviction that it sent a chill down Sarah's spine. But she dismissed it as his imagination, a child's way of coping with the new environment. But then, late one night, Sarah heard it too. A faint, almost imperceptible sound that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. It was a soft knock, rhythmic and deliberate. A soft knock from beneath the bed. Sarah's heart raced as she listened, the reality of Ollie's words sinking in. What was lurking beneath their new home? Curious and terrified, Sarah pried up the floorboards in Ollie's room one morning while he was at school. She had been hearing strange noises at night, whispers that seemed to come from beneath the floor. The sounds were faint but persistent, and they filled her with an inexplicable dread. Determined to find the source, she waited until the house was empty to investigate. Her heart pounded as she lifted each creaky board, revealing a dark, hidden space below. Below, she found an old wooden crawl space, and something worse. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. She shone her flashlight into the darkness, her breath catching in her throat as the beam revealed the outline of something small and fragile. A child's skeleton curled into a ball, clutching a stuffed rabbit, one eye missing, fur rotted. The sight was both heartbreaking and horrifying. Sarah's mind raced with emotions, sorrow, fear, and a deep sense of unease. The tiny bones were eerily well preserved, as if the child had been waiting all these years to be found. The stuffed rabbit, once a source of comfort, now looked grotesque in the dim light. There was something carved into the wood around the remains. He wouldn't stop crying. The words were jagged and desperate, as if etched by a trembling hand. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who was this child? What had happened here? The message was a chilling clue, hinting at a story of unimaginable sorrow and fear. Sarah called the police. They sealed the space and opened an investigation. The coroner determined the remains were over 70 years old. The discovery made headlines and the small town buzzed with speculation. The police interviewed elderly residents, hoping to piece together the tragic history of the house. They combed through old records, trying to identify the child and uncover any leads. Despite their efforts, the case remained a haunting mystery. The case was closed, but the house did not forget. The whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. Sarah could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, a constant reminder of the child who had suffered in silence. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own, its dark history seeping into every corner. Sarah knew that some secrets refused to stay buried. Ollie's behavior changed. He stopped eating. He used to be a lively child, always running around and playing with his toys. But now, he just sat in the corner of his room, staring blankly at the walls. His once rosy cheeks had turned pale, and his eyes seemed to have lost their sparkle. Sarah, his mother, was worried sick. She tried everything to get him to eat, but nothing worked. It was as if he was fading away right in front of her eyes, started whispering to someone invisible. At first, Sarah thought it was just a phase, maybe an imaginary friend. But the whispers grew more frequent and intense. She could hear him talking late into the night, having full conversations with someone who wasn't there. The things he said were chilling, talking about dark places and cold hands. It sent shivers down her spine. Ollie, he says he's cold. He would often complain about feeling cold even when the room was warm. Sarah would wrap him in blankets, but it never seemed to help. He would shiver uncontrollably, his teeth chattering as if he were standing in a blizzard. It was as if the cold was coming from within him. He wants to come upstairs. Ollie would often point to the bottom of the stairs, saying that someone was waiting there. He would beg Sarah to let him come upstairs, saying that he was lonely and needed company. The thought of an unseen presence lurking in their home terrified Sarah, but she tried to stay strong for Ollie's sake. Sarah begged him to stop talking like that. She pleaded with him to stop mentioning the invisible friend, to stop talking about the cold and the shadows. But Ollie seemed unable to stop. It was as if he was being controlled by something beyond their understanding. Then, toys began moving on their own. Doors slammed. Lights flickered. The house itself seemed to be coming alive with a malevolent force. Sarah would find Ollie's toys scattered around the room, even though she had just cleaned up. Doors would slam shut with no one near them, and the lights would flicker ominously, casting eerie shadows on the walls. One night, Sarah woke to see Ollie standing at the edge of her bed, eyes completely white. Ollie, he's here now. The sight was horrifying. Ollie's eyes, once full of life, were now a blank, ghostly white. He stood there, motionless, and whispered that the presence was now in the room with them. Sarah felt a cold dread wash over her. He said, "You'll make a good mommy." Ollie's voice was different, deeper and more menacing. He spoke of the presence as if it were a friend, saying that it thought Sarah would make a good mommy. The words were like a knife to her heart, filling her with a sense of impending doom. Behind Ollie, the shape of a child, translucent, pale, and missing a jaw, crawled from the darkness. The apparition was horrifying, a ghostly child with a gaping hole where its jaw should have been. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it were coming to claim something. Sarah's scream echoed through the house, but there was no one to hear her. Sarah's fear grew with each passing day. She felt trapped in her own home, unable to escape the malevolent force that seemed to be tightening its grip on her family. She would cry in the dark, feeling utterly helpless and desperate for a way to save her son. Ollie began drawing disturbing pictures. Dark figures with hollow eyes, shadowy shapes lurking in corners. Each drawing seemed to depict the haunting more vividly, as if he were trying to communicate the terror he was experiencing. Desperate for answers, Sarah turned to the internet, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. She found forums and websites dedicated to the paranormal, but nothing seemed to offer a solution. Her desperation grew as she realized she was running out of options. In a final act of desperation, Sarah turned to prayer. She clutched a cross and prayed for deliverance, hoping that some higher power would intervene and save her son from the darkness that was consuming him. But the haunting continued, relentless and unforgiving. Sarah dug through town records and uncovered the truth. The house once belonged to a man named Elijah Crow, a widower who adopted a child named Timmy from an orphanage. Elijah was a devout man, and also deeply disturbed. He had lost his wife to illness and sought solace in religion. When Timmy began hearing voices and talking to imaginary friends, Elijah believed the boy was possessed. He locked him beneath the floor, praying for the devil to leave. But no one ever let him out. The neighbors eventually heard nothing. The town was small and rumors spread quickly, but no one dared to intervene. The townspeople whispered about Elijah's strange behavior and Timmy's disappearance, but fear kept them silent. Sarah planned to flee, packing in the middle of the night. She moved quickly, her hands trembling, but the house wouldn't let her. The windows locked, the doors slammed shut. Shadows danced on the walls. From beneath the floor came a violent shaking and then screaming. The walls bled. The lights flickered and went out. Sarah grabbed a candle, its flame barely piercing the darkness. In its glow, she saw Timmy. Flesh restored, eyes black, arms outstretched. "Timmy, Mommy, you found me. Now stay, forever." The candle blew out. Whispers filled the room and the darkness swallowed her whole. The house is empty again. Its windows are shattered and the garden is overgrown. Locals say it's colder now. The villagers whisper about the events, avoiding the house at all costs. That if you pass by with your windows down, you'll hear a boy crying for his mother, and see shadows moving in the dark, and a woman's voice answering, "Sarah, I'm here, sweetheart. I'll never leave again." The town has set up a small memorial, hoping to bring peace to the restless spirits. The house's history is a tapestry of tragedy and mystery woven through generations. We spoke to local historian Mrs. Evelyn Carter to uncover more about its past. Mrs. Carter, this house has always had an air of sadness about it. It was built in the late 1800s by the Thorne family. They were well respected, but their happiness was short-lived. Their youngest son, Thomas, disappeared without a trace. Some say he was the first to vanish beneath those floorboards. We also interviewed Mr. John Harris, who lived next door for over 50 years. Mr. Harris: "I remember the Johnson family who moved in during the 1950s. They were a lovely couple with a young daughter. But after a few months, they just left in the middle of the night, never to return. They never spoke of what happened. But I heard whispers of strange noises and cold spots in the house. The most recent tenants, the Walkers, experienced similar disturbances, Mrs. Walker. We tried to ignore it at first, the footsteps, the whispers, but when our son started talking to someone who wasn't there, we knew we had to leave." Each family, each story, adds another layer to the house's dark history. Mrs. Carter: "It's as if the house absorbs the sorrow of its inhabitants, feeding off their despair. Until the spirits within it find peace, I fear this cycle will continue." The house now stands as a silent sentinel, holding on to its secrets, waiting for the next chapter in its haunted history. The memorial set up by the town remains a beacon of hope, a small gesture to bring peace to the restless spirits that still linger within those walls. The full story of the house may never be known, but its legacy of sorrow and mystery endures.